My name's Brennan. I'm a physiotherapist and I have a blog called A Neuroplastic Approach to Pain. I'm often asked about the best exercises for limps and balance, and the answer is that there are no best exercises because something like a limp depends very much on your history and individual symptoms. So there's no simple one size fits all. That said, there's two types of issues that can contribute towards a limp. One is neurological, and that means that the messages aren't going from the brain to the muscles effectively, and that can be caused by something like a stroke or a head injury, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, or Parkinson's. The second kind, which is more what I deal with, are what we can call neuromuscular, and that means that the brain has learnt patterns of movement that can cause a limp, and they can be triggered by things like long-standing pain. They can also be caused by something like congenital hip dislocation, and that certainly needs to be checked to make sure that that isn't causing you a limp. If it's just a simple, straightforward muscle weakness problem, then these exercises will probably help. However, you should check with a practitioner to make sure that the exercises are appropriate and safe for you. I'm in the kitchen, and the reason I'm in the kitchen is a great place to do your exercises because you've got nice firm benches to hang on to and hopefully a bar stool, which makes things a little bit easier. The first exercise we're going to do is getting out of a chair, and the reason that you do that is because often people get out of a chair and keep walking with their backs bent forward. So up you get and then walking like that. So that really doesn't help limps. What we're going to practice here is the bench in front, feet about a foot apart. I'm going to stand up, and when I stand up, I'm going to get the weight evenly through the balls of my feet there. So standing up and simply getting my balance and down. So when you stand up, it's important to take a moment just to get that correct posture. Up, tall, and as if something's pulling you from the back of your head there like that. And chin should go in so your face is level with the wall opposite. Now, if you overcorrect and you go up and lean back, that gets dangerous. You could fall back. So make sure that you're safe when you do this exercise. You can go up and down 10 times would be great. Now, if your knees hurt, simply put a cushion here, make it higher, and practice getting up and down. So it's good for not only your balance, getting the starting point right, but helps strengthen your knees. Okay, so you practice standing up, you're getting up tall and try to pull yourself up tall. Now, once you're up, have a look in a mirror or on the video and check the distance between your waist and your arms. Often a limp will mean that your hip goes to one side like that and your pelvis drops down like that. That's called a Trendelenburg gait. So it means that when you walk, you put your weight on your right hip, for example, and it does that and off you go. That's what we're trying to iron out. So that can end up causing what's called a scoliosis, which is a curve in your spine. So we're trying to get stability through your hip and through your pelvis so it doesn't drop like that. So the first exercise is simply to stand, maybe your fingers on something, pull yourself up tall. Again, imagine that sky hook pulling you up from there. You want kind of an upward thrust. So you want these muscles, your gluteal muscles, to work to actually elevate you and stop you slipping sideways. So push that hip in there gently in your imagination or literally. Push it in, up tall and relax. See if it slips out sideways, simply go in, up tall and relax. So you're not really moving anything, you're not doing very much, you're just correcting that by pulling it in sideways. Then check again, see how the distance is between your waist and your arms. Now that can hurt. So if you've got this habitual posture like that, it might be because you're trying to avoid putting weight on either leg. So if you put a little bit of weight here, I'm going to put the weight onto my left leg. If that hurts, what you might do is just go a tiny bit onto it and just practice that little and often. So maybe 5 times, several times a day, just gradually putting weight through your hip. And what that can do is train up the muscles to take the pressure off, and it'll ease the pain. So even if you have a diagnosis of osteoarthritis, it's very much worth doing this to see if you can teach those muscles to learn to stabilize without pain by doing it a little tiny movements and often. Now, a really good way to check if you're getting stability and evenness is, I'm going to cut off my head here, so I'm going up to the screen, and as I go side to put my weight on one side and then I put my weight on the other leg, do you see that my shoulders don't drop? Whereas if I had that hip giving way, I'd do that. And you can see it just by looking at your shoulders. So side to side, that's good. Side to side, that's not so good. So just looking at your shoulders will give you a guide. The other way is to put your elbows bent firmly in at your waist, like that. So I'm locking them in as if they're tied into my waist, and then just trailing my fingers on the bench and just going side to side on the bench like that, right? So if I'm going side to side, and I'll do it on the chair here, you can see it there. If I'm going side to side, elbows locked in, nothing's moving, you can see that my hands are just skimming over the top of the chair. But if I had my hip giving way or unstable, down I go that way. Can you see? So that's what you don't want. You don't want your shoulders to drop. You don't want your skimming hands to suddenly touch the chair like that. So that's sideways movement, fingers skimming the top and staying the same distance over the bench or over the chair without giving way or collapsing. What I was doing then is I was making the movement slightly bigger. So perhaps after a few days of practicing just tiny movements, just getting the weight just slightly onto one side then the other, you can then go slightly further. So what I'm going to do is put my feet now, I've been practicing that for a couple of days, it feels easy. I've got the weight through without pain. I put my feet just slightly further apart, not much, still, pretty much underneath my hips. And this time I'm just going to go over a little bit more and actually take the weight off my heel. So as I go into my right side, I'm lifting my left heel up just slightly, and to the other side, lifting my hip up slightly. So looking at it this way, this is a progression. I'm going over slightly, heels up. So what that means is I'm actually taking more weight through the hip because I'm lifting this one up. So that's a prelude to walking. I'm getting ready to not only put my weight on my hip, but to lift my foot off and move. So just to repeat the exercise, it starts off feet fairly close, just getting your weight side to side, and move your feet a little bit further, and just taking more weight, slightly lifting your heel. But very importantly, you're not letting your hip collapse. You're keeping it steady and stable with an upward thrust, keeping you tall. Right. I'm going to demonstrate a very simple calf stretch. So one of the reasons that people might have a limp is that their calf muscles are tight. So we're starting off with feet together, toes pointing forwards, heels touching. I'm holding onto my bar stool heel for a little bit of security. Just going to step forward with my right foot and bend my right knee, and making sure that my right knee goes over my toes and back. I'm not aiming for a big stretch here, I'm just bending my knee, getting a little bit of confidence, putting the weight through my knee and back. Now if you look at me forwards, I'm bending my knee, but I'm not losing that hip stability. So if you look at the forwards picture, make sure you're not doing that. It's still about steadiness, going forward and back. I often suggest people do this 10 times very loosely, maybe alternating legs, and just to relax the calf muscles, get the calf muscles loosened up. So you're not doing it hard, you're just getting stability through your knee and your hip in this exercise. And you might finish it up by doing a bit more of a calf stretch. That means locking your knee back, arching back slightly, and you should feel a bit of a stretch down the back of your calf. 3, 2, 1. Don't hold a stretch for a long time if you're first starting off, because that'll create pain. So it's just gentle pushing your knee back, feeling a calf stretch. 3, 2, 1. This is exercise number 4. So it's a progression from the calf stretch. What we're going to do here is look at the amount of step that you take. So often what happens with there's pain is taking small steps like this and getting off it quickly, so that you're not getting an even step through each leg. So same as the calf stretch, what I'm going to do though is step all the way through. So I'm going to start with my foot back, and this time step all the way through. But I'm going to use my ankle and make sure that I hit the ground with my heel first, then take the weight forward, my hand sliding forward on the bench, and I'm lifting the back heel up. So before we did something slightly different to that. Now as I go back, my heel stays on the ground on my left leg, but my toe raises. So just stepping through and back. So it's just practicing the mechanics of one step without losing the hip stability and making sure that I'm taking quite a big step and I'm using my ankles. So I'm not walking flat-footed, I'm getting heels and toes moving. Now when you step through on one leg, make sure that this leg is just very slightly bent. So if there's been something like a stroke, sometimes that ankle, knee, flicks back like this and what we call hyperextend. So to really effectively get weight through your knee, you're actually keeping your knee slightly bent, very slightly, and through. So just so you can see it on a different angle, I'm going through, and you might just do 10 of those. Make sure it's safe, make sure you talk to a physio, and make sure it's the right exercise for you. So I might do 10 on one and then swap, and 10 on the others. Now it's always a good idea to start by doing this on your better leg. We shouldn't say good leg, but the one that feels more steady. And then you can get a benchmark of what it should feel like and have a look. And also using the video like this is quite good because you can have a look at yourself on the video and see if you're getting that stability and a good step through. Sometimes it's helpful if you've got a floor that you can put chalk marks on, is to mark out even steps so that you practice taking even steps up and down as a progression. So another good warm-up exercise is to just do some hip, knee and ankle movements like that, just to get circulation going. What I'm aiming for here is stability still in the palm of my trunk and turning around. I've still got that stability going there. I'm not moving a lot. We'll work on that in a minute. Just getting heel toe moving. And again, part of the reason that I really like that is because it aims to get a bit more movement through your feet. And often if your feet haven't been moving properly or stuck in shoes without, the flat-footed walk, you can get a feeling of numbness in your toes. Now you do have to make sure that that isn't caused by diabetes or some problem like that. So you need to understand if it's not a medical condition, but if it's not, just a feeling of strange tingling numbness, sometimes you just need to make sure that you're getting that movement through your feet and through your knees like that. And it's a simple thing you can do. Putting yourself up as tall as possible, as often as possible. Okay, so this exercise we're practicing some more rotation. So we've been working on stability and making sure that when you put your weight through your hips stay stable and your pelvis doesn't drop. So we've been working on loosening up knees and ankles and toes. Now we're going to get a bit more trunk rotation happening, which you need when you're walking. So if you go back to this exercise that we did, which is that one there, what we really want to happen now is a little bit of arm movement. So when your left knee bends, your right arm goes forward and then the opposite, like that. So getting some rotation, opposite hand, opposite knee through my trunk, but I'm not losing stability. So if you look at this, forward, opposite hand, opposite knee, but I'm not collapsing. So it's still staying stable, but I'm getting stability plus trunk rotation. And this exercise is quite good for early stages of Parkinson's if that's causing a limp. Just trying to get that rotation through your system, opposite hand, opposite knee, opposite hand, opposite knee, holding onto something so you're steady and stable. Now I'm going to add into that a little bit more rotation work. So I'm still there, bench here. I've got my weight evenly through both legs. I'm not going sideways like that, but I'm going to rotate. Now the thing about rotation is you've got to be careful that you never suddenly twist and turn, because that can cause a hip fracture. If you suddenly turn, like swivel or pivot on one leg when you've got instability in the hip muscles can give way suddenly and that could cause a fracture. So it's good to practice very carefully and perhaps under supervision of a physiotherapist some rotation that trains the muscles to work without giving way with a slight rotation. Feet apart, hands on the bench. What I'm going to do is rotate to my left, lift up my right heel and go back. I'm going to keep my head facing forward as I do that. See how my head stays forward? So that gets a little bit of rotation through my neck and shoulder blades, so that's good for loosening up there. Seems like a very simple exercise, but it actually takes a little bit of coordination. So when I go towards my right, my left heel lifts up but my head stays forward. When I go to the left, my right heel lifts up but my head stays forward. And don't do this too suddenly, and make sure that you're safe when you do it, and check with your physiotherapist that it's right for you. So rotation and stop. Okay, so many people are prescribed exercises using weights or rubber bands, and they can be quite good, but they can actually reinforce a limp. So if you've got a weight on this leg or elastics and you do that, you're actually training your hip to give way. So I always leave weights till well after you've got really good stability, trunk rotation, and that you can balance effectively on one leg without it collapsing. Another exercise that I see a lot of people do wrong is sideways walking. So sideways walking is meant to encourage that hip stability, but if you walk sideways and you're going like that, that again is training a limp. So just to go back to one of the exercises we did before, this is sideways, but this time I'm going to move. Trail your fingertips very lightly on the bench, lock your elbows in. So as I step sideways, I'm not going to push down with one hand or the other. They're going to stay the same pressure on the top. So sideways, take your balance through your hips sideways and along, and then sideways back. So it's a good exercise so long as you do it without your hands dropping down like that. So what I'm going to do in this exercise is put them all together in a way that's safe, because I'm going to use my kitchen bench and walk around the kitchen bench. I'm going to pretend that my right leg is the weak leg, and I'm going to use my opposite hand, which is the left hand, to get a good wide stride or step. I'm going to hit my heel first. I'm going to look straight ahead and talk a little bit more as I go. So opposite hand with your opposite foot. So I'm going to step forward with my right foot and my left hand, and swing my right hand up tall, heel hitting the ground first, nice big step. And what you're practicing here is walking and looking forward at the same time, rather than looking down at the ground, because you know you've got the security. Again, watch the square corners as you go around so you don't hit your hip while you're doing it. Now, if you haven't got a centre bench like this to walk around, I'm just going to swing the camera around so you can see an island. What do you call it? This kind of kitchen. Anyway, opposite hand, opposite foot. So right foot, left hand, right foot, left hand, right foot, left hand, swinging and coming down, but not swiveling, because swiveling can be dangerous on some hips. So whenever I turn, I'm stepping, not swiveling. Okay, I hope that these exercises have helped, and they might fill in for a period like we have in Melbourne, where you're not able to see physiotherapists individually. So good luck with them.